It was a warm Sunday in mid-April, the kind that tricked the Denver suburbs into believing spring had finally stuck around for good. I had just finished a brutal remote work week from my home office in Evergreen Pines, scrubbed the kitchen until it gleamed like a real estate listing, and walked the 3 blocks to the monthly HOA potluck at Vicky Harborough's McMansion out of pure muscle memory rather than any real excitement. The smell of overcooked burgers and cheap Chardonnay hung thick in the air. Vicky's husband grunted a hello without glancing up from his phone. Vicky herself handed me a paper plate the way you'd hand a neighbor a rake, polite, but clearly expecting me to do something useful with it. As always, the room lit up when her inner circle arrived. Those women had the Instagram-ready glow that looked effortless but took 3 ring lights and a prayer. They laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny and touched arms like they'd taken a seminar in manufactured warmth. Vicky's husband looked proud. The rest of the board looked relieved. I poured myself lukewarm lemonade and took the last plastic fork. "Big surprise, everyone," Vicky announced, settling in her throne-like patio chair like she was about to drop the 10 Commandments. "We're planning the first ever members-only luxury retreat this summer. La Jolla Resort, full ocean view suites, kids splash zone, spa credits, the works." The table erupted. Someone actually clapped. Vicky beamed. "We've already started booking the block of rooms close to the beach. Everything's covered by the special assessment we voted on last quarter." She gestured at the group like a game show host. "Finally, a real break for the people who make this neighborhood shine." I smiled, nodded, said, "That sounds lovely," even though no one had said my name. Not once. Still, I waited. Maybe it was an oversight. "Elena, dear," Vicky continued in that syrupy voice she reserved for people she needed something from. "You're so good at planning logistics. Maybe you could help coordinate the flights, car rentals, and vendor confirmations from here? You know how important it is to keep everything running smoothly back home." There it was. Not, "We're so excited you're coming," but "Help us get there." I swallowed the sudden tightness in my throat and nodded. "Sure." Later that evening, I opened the shared HOA retreat fund calendar I had built myself 2 years ago, the one everyone relied on, but no one ever thanked me for maintaining. The entries were already live. Departure dates, hotel confirmations, theme park add-ons. I scrolled slowly, looking for my name. It wasn't there. I texted Vicky directly. "Am I missing something? Didn't see my name on the attendee list." The typing dots danced for a suspicious length of time. Her reply finally pinged. "We thought you'd be more valuable holding down the fort here. The neighborhood needs its most reliable resident watching the properties while we're gone. You understand." Understand? I worked 50-plus hours a week, paid my mortgage on time, single-handedly organized last year's 4th of July fireworks display after the board forgot to file the permit, and had personally covered the $1,200 shortfall for the community pool resurfacing because the budget was tight. But Vicky needed a break. And me? I was apparently the human equivalent of a Ring camera with a lawnmower license. I didn't argue. I just sat there nodding like I'd heard the weather report. Back at home, I poured a glass of wine and stared at the wall. Not the peaceful kind of silence, the kind that hums in your bones like a cheap fluorescent light. I thought about every holiday cookout where I grilled while everyone else napped, every time I drove Vicky's mother to physical therapy when no one else could be bothered, every absurd fine I'd quietly paid so the board wouldn't look bad. The ones who hold up the neighborhood are rarely the ones pictured in the annual community spirit calendar. That night, unable to sleep, I opened Vicky's email chain. She never logs out of the shared HOA Google account I set up for her. There, under the subject line, "Final Retreat Confirmations," was the message that cracked whatever politeness I had left. Vicky had written to the board. "We decided it would be best to let Elena sit this one out. She's better behind the scenes anyway. Sit this one out like a high school bench warmer. Not the woman who paid for the shuttle buses last summer. Not the resident who paused her own vacation plans 3 times to fix the board's mistakes." I closed the laptop slowly, my reflection caught in the blackened screen. For a second, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Then I whispered it aloud, just to claim it. That's when I realized I wasn't invited. I was assigned. Monday came just like it always does. No ceremony, no apology. The house was still, but my mind wasn't. I powered on my laptop the same way I had for the last 6 years of remote work, staring at digital project timelines while my inbox filled with HOA requests. There was a strange clarity in the order of spreadsheets and vendor contracts. Everything was traceable, documented, accountable, unlike the conversations from yesterday. I kept thinking about that line. She's better behind the scenes anyway. The words had stuck to me like a cheap HOA violation sticker I couldn't peel off. Mid-morning, I heard a knock at the door. A delivery driver handed me a small glittery package. I signed without thinking, brought it inside, and opened it on the counter. Inside was a pastel pink spa basket, lavender soap, a planner with gold foil lettering that read, "Your year of balance," and a coupon for a yoga studio I never attended. The card read, "Thanks for watching The Neighborhood next week. You're the best resident ever. We'll send pics." Vicky and the board. I stood there for a moment. Just stood. The silence stretched. I wasn't even angry yet. I smiled, but not with my face, just with muscle memory. I whispered to myself, guest silence makes me the perfect assistant. I hadn't agreed to anything. No one had asked me directly. They just assumed again because I had never said no before. I placed the basket gently under the hallway lamp where it sat like a prop in a play I hadn't auditioned for, but somehow landed the lead role in. That evening, I went to the neighborhood block party at the community pavilion. It was Vicky's idea, a little pre-retreat celebration. The kind of thing you show up to with a store-bought salad and leave with something aching in your chest. At one point, Vicky stood near the grill, chatting with a new resident I hadn't met. He pointed at me across the lawn. "Is that Elena?" Vicky waved him off with a laugh. "Oh yeah, she's staying back to manage the neighborhood while we're gone." Such a lifesaver. There it was out loud in public. Not a whisper, not an implication, just fact. Dropped into the conversation like a weather report. I caught the new neighbor's eye. He looked confused, not pitiful, just trying to reconcile the version of me he'd heard about with what Vicky had just said. The board members stood nearby. They said nothing. Vicky smiled and sipped her Chardonnay. And me? I stayed still. My jaw didn't tighten. My eyes didn't water. But something shifted in my head. I heard it clear as day. They're writing my character without me. After the cake, I left early, claiming I had work in the morning. Which wasn't a lie. But I didn't go home and open my laptop right away. I stood in my living room, staring at the gift basket under the warm yellow lamp. I walked over, picked it up, and dropped it straight into the donation bin by the door. No ceremony, just removal. Then I sat down, opened a new spreadsheet, and titled it, "Lines Not to Cross 2024. I didn't know yet what I would fill it with, but I knew it was time I kept record. Not of their actions, of mine. Because somewhere between being helpful and selfless, I had disappeared. I needed to see myself again in writing. Just before bed, my phone buzzed. A new group chat had been created, Retreat Countdown. The title danced with palm tree emojis. I hesitated, then opened it. First message, a selfie of the entire board in matching polo shirts standing under a banner that read, "Ready for our dream retreat." Vicky was front and center, beaming. My name wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. But I was expected, just not there. They didn't see me missing because I was never supposed to be seen. Thursday mornings are usually quiet in Evergreen Pines. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of stillness that lets certain thoughts walk in without knocking. As I waited for the coffee to finish brewing, the smell filled the room. Familiar, grounding, but it didn't settle anything. Vicky's voice looped in my head like a podcast I never subscribed to. She's staying back to manage the neighborhood. Such a lifesaver. That line wouldn't leave me alone. I could still hear the easy laughter that followed, like I was a well-behaved watchdog they trusted not to bark. I took my coffee to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling mindlessly. Somewhere between a sourdough recipe and garden hacks, I opened a tab and typed best solo retreats for women over 35. It wasn't that I needed a vacation. I just needed distance. Space. Something that didn't ask me to be responsible for anyone else's joy. And just like that, a memory from 2 years ago crawled back in. I had planned a weekend cabin trip in the mountains. Nothing fancy, just pine trees, books, and no phone service. It was meant to be the first thing I'd done entirely for myself in years. I'd started packing when Vicky called, voice shrill and chaotic. The pool contractor bailed, and the board is panicking. We know you were looking forward to your little trip, but this would help so much. Just this once. I canceled the reservation, ate the non-refundable deposit, and sent the board a get-well basket for the community stress. A week later, they gave me a $25 Starbucks card as thanks. That was the first time I wondered, if I stopped helping, would they still remember to call? Later that afternoon, I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. A new entry, my version of events. I stared at the blinking cursor for a while, then closed it without typing a word. It hit me, they didn't forget me. They just never wrote me in. That evening, I roasted vegetables for dinner. Something mindless to keep my hands busy. The silence in the apartment didn't feel restful anymore. It felt like proof. The phone rang. Vicky. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Hi, sweetie, she said, overly cheery. Just checking in. How's your week? I gave her short, safe answers. Yes, work was fine. No, I hadn't seen the weather forecast. Yes, I was eating enough. The usual script. Then, before she hung up, she dropped it like a final sprinkle of sugar over something sour. Oh, and guess what? I'm turning the community photo albums into a blog, documenting our neighborhood history. Isn't that cute? I'll let the pause hang in the air. Then I said, you should double-check your sources before publishing fiction. Vicky laughed nervously. Oh, Elena. I ended the call before she could fill the silence. I stood there, phone still in hand, not angry anymore, just done. They hadn't written me out. They never intended to write me in. I was footnoted. I drove down to the community center with a handmade gift wrapped in brown craft paper, a soft quilted banner I'd stitched with the neighborhood crest for the retreat welcome sign. I had been working on it for weeks. I didn't expect anyone to notice, but part of me still hoped they would. The parking lot was empty. I left it on the welcome bench with a card. To the stargazers who actually see the whole sky. I lingered on the front step, watching the wind sway the perfectly pruned roses Vicky had once bragged about. The building looked peaceful, curated, like the life they lived inside it had already been edited for Instagram. The following weekend, we had a family-style neighborhood lunch at the Pavilion. I showed up late, slipped into the background as I'd learned to do well. The kind of event where paper plates are passed around like truths no one wants to face. One of the newer residents found me during dessert. She tugged my sleeve with all the innocence in the world. Vicky said you don't like fancy places because you can't afford them. I froze, not outwardly, just for a second inside. The kind of pause that rewrites the definition of silence. I nodded slowly. Oh yeah, Vicky said that. She smiled and took another bite of her cookie, completely unaware she'd just carved something deep. I looked up. Across the room, Vicky laughed at something. The board stood nearby, plates in hand, smiling politely. No one noticed me in that moment, but I noticed all of them. They started briefing the new people, I thought. Later that night, back home, I scrolled through the HOA Facebook group while reheating leftover risotto. That's when I saw Vicky's latest post. A collage of pre-retreat snapshots, suitcases lined by the curb, printed itineraries, matching travel water bottles labeled for every board member, and even their golden retrievers. The caption read, "Neighborhood loading up for memories of a lifetime. We're finally whole." That word landed like a punch I didn't see coming. I wasn't just being left out. I was being replaced. They weren't going without me. They were going because I wouldn't be there, in somewhere that made them feel complete. I stared at the wall for a while. No tears, just calculation. I opened my notebook and wrote across the top of a fresh page. Terms of engagement, moving forward. Underneath, I made a list. No more silent favors. No more being the shadow supporter. No more smiling through disrespect. No more waiting to be seen. The next morning, I got an email from Vicky. Subject: Retreat Photo Project, Contributions Needed. Attached was a draft layout of a new community album. Cover image: Vicky and the board on the beach. First page titled Evergreen Pines Leadership Circle. I wasn't in any of them, not even the margins. My finger hovered over the reply all button. I didn't click it. Not yet. They framed me out. Maybe it was time I framed myself back in. I hadn't opened that banking portal in years. The subject line was innocuous: Joint Retreat Expense Access. It was from Vicky, dated 2 springs ago. Back then she'd called it a shared solution to streamline things. I had helped her set it up, connected the accounts, even built the spreadsheet template. It was supposed to be for emergencies and community needs. In typical Elena fashion, I trusted. But that morning something gnawed at me. I pulled it up while sipping reheated coffee. I started scrolling through the expense log. There it was. $2,750 marked airfare plus rental van. $900 tag resort reservation hold. Other chunks labeled vaguely as group prep, entertainment, family travel, logistics. My jaw clenched. My eyes moved faster than I could keep up with the numbers. I checked the deposit records. My name was on nearly all of them. The rest of the board? Nothing since December 2020. Vicky had never linked a card. Not once. They were planning a $35,000 retreat with money I had mostly funded. And somehow I was the only one staying behind. It wasn't just that they hadn't invited me. They had used my money to fund my replacement. That kind of betrayal doesn't feel loud. It feels surgical. Later that day, I got a call from Vicky. We spoke briefly about logistics, what time I could swing by to pick up the spare keys for Neighborhood Watch. I kept my voice even. She said goodbye, but didn't hang up. In the background, I heard her husband's voice, muffled but unmistakable. Elena's not really into all that fancy stuff anyway. It's better this way. That was the sound of a knife, not a whisper. I ended the call, sat down, and replayed the recording 3 times just to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. I had heard it right. Not really into all that fancy stuff. Maybe if I weren't paying for it, I wouldn't be. But here we were. I deleted the recording, not because it wasn't evidence, but because I didn't need proof anymore. I needed perspective. That evening, I poured myself a glass of red and opened a new email draft. Subject: Clarifying Contributions. It was a bullet point list, dates, dollar amounts, attached receipts. I included the initial transfer to set up the account, the emergency fund contributions, the holiday event grocery coverage, the contractor copays I had handled when the board forgot their wallets. At the bottom I typed, moving forward, I will no longer contribute to decisions I am not included in. I saved it. Didn't send it. Not yet. Aunt Vera, the only board member with a spine, called later. She has a voice like gravel coated in honey. Gentle, but never weak. I heard you're not going to La Jolla, she said. No, I replied. Apparently it's not for people like me. There was a pause, the kind that tells you someone's gearing up to drop something heavy. Well, that's funny, she said slowly, because they use your name to make the hotel booking. I know the manager at the property. Your name's on the master reservation. That's how they got the group discount. I stopped breathing for half a second. They didn't just leave me behind. They stood on my name to get where they were going. The message from Vera lingered like a ghost. I reread it Friday morning while stirring creamer into my coffee. Her words played over in my head like an accusation and a warning all at once. I closed my laptop and went to the cabinet where I kept my records, notebooks, old folders, envelopes full of just-in-case documents I'd never thought I'd actually need. And then at the very back, my personal spreadsheet labeled in small black print, support given, never returned. I scrolled through the rows. March 2019, $180 groceries for the community picnic during Vicky's recovery. September 2020, $450 emergency pool repair. December 2021, $200 down payment for the holiday photo shoot Vicky canceled but never reimbursed. Every amount neatly recorded. Every note beside it, not repaid. No thank you. Ghosted. I color-coded them. Red for betrayal, yellow for oversight, green for clearly intentional deceit. The screen looked like a heat map of generosity turned one-sided. This wasn't revenge. This was reconciliation with reality. I sat back, exhaled slowly, and opened the banking portal tied to the retreat fund account. The same one I helped create, the same one they'd used not just as backup, but as foundation. I changed the password first, then removed all automatic links, closed their access, and created a notification. Account scheduled for deactivation by Sunday evening. Once everything was confirmed, I sent an email to the entire board thread. Simple, direct. Subject: change of access, shared retreat account. Effective Sunday, the shared account will be closed. Please ensure any pending expenses are resolved elsewhere. Attached are the transaction summaries for your records. I expected silence. Instead, Vicky responded within minutes. This is completely unnecessary and dramatic. We could have just talked about it. I didn't hesitate. I typed back. For years of silence wasn't a conversation. I logged out, not with anger, but with certainty. The rest of the day, I focused on work, cleared my inbox, finished a quarterly report. By 6 p.m., I'd moved on to a different kind of organization. I printed every document from the account history, every invoice, every email trail, every bank statement that had my name on it. I put them in a black folder and labeled it protective distance. Then I whispered out loud to no one but myself. If they want to call me cold, let them. I've been burned enough to earn it. It was nearly 8 p.m. when I shut my laptop and stood a stretch. I had just poured myself a glass of water when my phone buzzed. A new message from Vicky's husband. Vicky is upset. Can you undo whatever you just did? No greeting, no punctuation, just a request built on assumption. Instead of responding, I opened the group chat, held my thumb on it, and deleted. There was no final message, no warning, no explanation. If they only reached out when I closed the door, maybe it was never really open. Early Sunday mornings used to be my refuge. But now even the quiet felt staged. My phone buzzed on the counter. Notification. I've been tagged in a Facebook post by Vicky. It was a blog teaser, raising a neighborhood of grace and strength. The photo, me in the background of a past event, cropped and filtered, no credit, just a caption underneath. Home is where the love is. Every corner tells a story of growth. She didn't even bother to blur out the framed photo of me on my own wall. Scrolling further, another post popped up minutes later titled, What Community Means. At the top was a handwritten note I had written for the board 2 years ago, a private thank you card I'd spent an hour choosing. She had quoted it word for word, only now beneath her own name, something I told the neighborhood once. No mention of me. It wasn't just theft. It was erasure by repackaging. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. She was building a brand on pieces of me. I didn't yell. I didn't call. I opened a new folder on my laptop labeled Documentation and began collecting screenshots, metadata, dates, and messages from every weekend I'd been asked, can you just, followed by something small that turned into something costly. Then I opened my email and began drafting. Subject, misattribution, content used without consent. I typed only 3 lines. You have used my words, my space, and my time without acknowledgement. This is not about permission. This is about respect. I didn't hit send. Not yet. Let them think I'm quiet. They've mistaken silence for weakness. The text came just as I was finishing my coffee early Saturday morning, sky still pale gray. They're stuck at the airport. Something's wrong with the booking under your name. I set my mug down and logged into the travel portal, the one I hadn't touched in nearly a year, where I'd once helped Vicky organize reward points and loyalty perks. I saw the alert immediately, booking flagged for fraud. Reservation canceled due to ID mismatch. My name was on the hotel reservation, but not the face that showed up to claim it. By noon, the full picture emerged. Vera called from the airport. Her voice equal parts amused and horrified. It was chaos. Vicky tried to check in under your name. Claimed it was a group booking oversight. TSA stopped her. Your name triggered a security flag. They didn't even have the right documents. I stayed quiet. They looked like they didn't even know whose trip they were on, Vera added. Because they didn't. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Archive, Not Forgetting. I clicked on a voice memo, one Vicky had left by accident a year ago. A 38-second recording of her talking to the board after thinking the call with me had ended. Elena holds this neighborhood together. But don't tell her that. She already thinks she does too much. I'd kept that recording. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me needed proof I wasn't crazy. This time I didn't keep it for myself. I emailed it to the entire neighborhood thread. No subject line, no message, just a voice memo. Then I opened the group chat and clicked Leave Conversation. Confirm deletion. The first text came within 5 minutes. Vicky, what is this? Why would you send that? That wasn't meant for you. Exactly. Next came the board. You've gone too far. We're dealing with enough right now. Vicky is humiliated. I replied to none of them. Instead, I got dressed, left the apartment, and walked to the bookstore down the street. I didn't know what I was looking for until I saw it. A hardback journal, deep green, gold embossed on the front, Inheritance. I bought it, went home, opened to the first page, and wrote, Day 1 of taking back what was mine. 3 days after the airport fallout, the neighborhood felt eerily still. Not the kind of stillness that invites peace. This was the quiet that follows impact. I hadn't responded to a single message. My silence, once mistaken for submission, was now a barricade, and I was done explaining why. I logged into the resort portal one last time. The guest list was there, neat, official, confirmed names. Mine wasn't one of them. I opened the file history, past versions, archived edits. There was a secondary account under my frequent flyer ID, same credentials I had once offered up to help get perks for a trip I was supposed to be on years ago. They'd reused the data, not even for me, just to leverage the discount. They hadn't forgotten to include me. They had included me as a loophole. Later that afternoon, Vera forwarded me a PDF, a copy of the printed itinerary they'd handed out at the airport before the debacle. Next to my name, someone had typed, Not applicable, domestic support. They hadn't overlooked me. They had written me out deliberately. And still they needed what I provided. I smiled. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't fake. It was just recognition. That evening I sat with my journal open and wrote in small, firm handwriting, I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because staying hurt me. Underneath it, I began sketching a rough itinerary of my own. A solo trip to Sedona. No plans to share, no announcements, no permission asked or needed. The next morning I finished packing my small suitcase. Efficient, a few dresses, a sun hat, my camera, no itinerary to share, no goodbyes to give. While I waited at the terminal, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Voicemail. I let it sit before listening. The voice was low, familiar. I know you're leaving. Just wanted to say we noticed all of it. It could have been Vicky's husband or maybe Vera. It didn't matter. Noticed too late, but noticed finally. The sky above Sedona was the kind of orange that made you stop mid-step. I stood on the overlooked trail as the sun peeled slowly over the red rock horizon. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a first chapter. This time mine. A notification blinked. Fraud case resolved. Charges reversed. Another account closure confirmed. I swiped them away. Messages from the neighborhood were piling up below that one. Unread, unanswered. Some frantic, some apologetic in the way cowards apologize. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I opened the sealed envelope Vera had pressed in my hand before I left. The paper inside was soft, the handwriting unmistakable. You were always the backbone. They just got too comfortable leaning on you. She recounted stories I barely remembered. Me navigating the neighborhood recovery schedule at 35, organizing Thanksgiving dinner last year after everyone else dropped out. Each sentence was a breadcrumb back to myself. They never thank you because they thought you'd never leave. You did, and that's how they finally saw you. I sat with that for a long time, not in pain, in power. Back at the Airbnb, I took out my laptop and opened a new email draft. No subject line, no attachments, just words. This will be my last communication for a while. I wish you all peace. I just no longer choose to be part of space that only values my silence. You didn't lose a resident. You lost your mirror. I hit send. Then I blocked the thread, deleted the chat, and closed the laptop. Later that evening, I booked another solo trip, Glacier National Park. Farther north, quieter skies. I updated my journal, Inheritance, with a final entry for the year. Silence wasn't peace. Speaking wasn't rage. Leaving wasn't weakness. It was love for myself. I donated the last box of neighborhood memorabilia the next morning, except one photo, me at 34, barefoot on a lawn chair, laughing into a sunset. No one else in frame. I framed it, placed it on my nightstand. The day I flew out, I didn't check my messages, didn't leave a note. I just left. The wind on the cliff where I stood felt sharper than before. Cleansing in a way no apology could be. I didn't take a selfie, didn't document the view. I just breathed it in. Then I whispered, not to anyone, just to the sky. They thought they exiled me. But I left to find the place I belonged. And I did. I wasn't the one who disappeared. I was the one who finally appeared.